Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 Primetime. I'm Juliette Goodrich. We are following breaking news. Multiple law enforcement officials tell CBS News the suspect in the shooting of National Guard members in Washington, D.C. today is 29-year-old Afghan national Rahmanullah Lakanwal. They note he entered the U.S. in 2021. Sources also say a handgun was used in this attack. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga has the latest.
The chaotic scene played out just about 100 feet behind me here, 2 blocks north of the White House. Members of the National Guard deployed from the state of West Virginia were on a high visibility patrol when a suspect armed with a handgun rounded the corner near a metro stop here in downtown D.C. and opened fire. All in all, there were about 10 to 15 shots fired in what law enforcement officials tell us was an ambush-style attack. Now, 2 members of the National Guard were evacuated to an area hospital where they are in critical condition. Both of them shot, but senior law enforcement officials telling us they are good and stable at this hour. The suspect, also injured, also transported to an area hospital. The suspect was shot 4 times, according to senior law enforcement officials. Just to paint a picture for you of this scene, within moments of the shots firing out, there were other members of the National Guard who rushed to the area of 17th and K, 17th and I Street here in downtown D.C. They were able to subdue the suspect, and within minutes, members of the Metropolitan Police, D.C. Police also responded, EMS, the fire department, plus just an onslaught of federal law enforcement, including members of the U.S. Secret Service Uniform Division, came running over from the White House along with members of the U.S. Marshals, ATF, and eventually the FBI. Now, today, President Trump called the suspect an animal, condemning him. And FBI Director Kash Patel said that the suspect will face enormous consequences for his action. The president also directing the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth today to deploy 500 additional National Guard members to the nation's capital. Right now, there are about 2,100 members of National Guard here. They've been here since roughly August, when the president first directed a national crime emergency here in Washington, D.C. I'm Nicole Sganga reporting from Washington. Send it back to you.
Let's go live to retired FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jeff Harp with more information and some insight. Jeff, law enforcement sources say the suspect is an Afghan national. So what are law enforcement officials doing now with that information? How does that change things? What is your insight?
Well, and so the obvious thing that comes to my mind is the question whether this is related to any sort of terrorism or someone who came here to commit a terrorist act. Obviously, targeting the National Guard has its own interest, because if this is an Afghan national that came here in 2021, then there could be some ties that have to larger terrorism groups.
So the FBI Director, Kash Patel, says that the FBI will lead the investigation. So what does that look like when the FBI takes the lead?
Yeah, and so, that's always a question I get asked about the FBI so-called taking over. They don't, what they'll do here is they will make sure that they deploy all the resources from the Washington field office and headquarters that help support the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And they will work this as a terrorism matter just due to the nature of the individual who committed the crime. They will work this as a terrorism matter until they decide that it's not. This will certainly give them some other resources to utilize and will bring a little bit different flavor to the investigation.
As you try to figure out the story or the narrative or the why behind it or the motive, if there even is one, we've learned that the suspect ran from a corner, kind of came out from around the corner and ambushed the guardsmen, if you will. What does that mean in that type of situation, or what they did?
Yeah, I've been at that metro stop 100 times. I lived in downtown DC. I worked several blocks away from there. I know it really well. And just the fact that it sounds like he probably had a concealed handgun on him. And when you're carrying a concealed handgun, when you don't go through metal detectors, you can walk freely around the whole downtown Washington, D.C. area. It becomes very problematic and very difficult to order to detect things like that. So when they're saying ambush, I mean, this guy could have literally walked upon these National Guardsmen and opened fire on them, and that's what it sounds to me like what probably happened. Not only that, they can conceal themselves behind any sort of barrier that to try to scope out where these guys are. So it sounds to me like there's definitely some pre-operational planning that occurred. This wasn't a spur of the moment sort of I hate the National Guard thing. And I'm also very curious to find out what ties they find this person might have to other groups or individuals that could be associated with terrorism.
Yeah, you bring up good points. And then lastly, moving forward, as we go into the holidays, as we go into the New York parade, what sort of things and cautions go into place now?
You know, every time we have an event like this, and certainly around the holidays when we have large gatherings of people, all that does is it creates a situation where we have a heightened sense of security. And I am quite certain that there will be heightened security in the DC area. There's lots of folks that go there and look at the Christmas tree and do all sorts of things around DC. And then you have the New York parade, NYPD, the JTTF up there in New York will certainly be looking at all of their assets and intel to make certain that they've got their bases covered and they don't have an event like this up there.
Great insight, good information. Jeff Harp, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
And we will continue to keep an eye on this breaking story out of our nation's capital.